Welcome to Charge Forward Coaching, the podcast for committed athletes and individuals who want to achieve more on and off the field. Hosted by James Blasco, certified mental toughness and resilience coach. You'll gain insights and inspiration from elite athletes, coaches, and others who know what it takes to excel. Are you ready to go to the next level? Then tune in, get inspired, and let's charge forward. Now here's your host, James Blasco.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Charge Forward Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, James Blasco. Well, today we're going to talk about mental toughness and the 4 C's as always. And to help us do that, I have a very special guest. He is the Flagler County Fire Rescue Captain Karl Froling. And in 2025, he was the Florida Search and Rescue Responder Officer of the Year. So very impressive, obviously deals with high pressure situations, and he is the perfect person to help us better understand mental toughness and the 4 C's. So Karl, welcome to the podcast.
James, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure. First podcast, so I'm excited.
Awesome. Yeah, they're fun. They're nice and relaxed conversations. So we're going to learn a lot from you today. So why don't we begin with your background, how you got into fire rescue, search and rescue, and what you do on a day-to-day basis right now.
Well, it's pretty funny. I was actually in my teens, early 90s. I was leaning more towards a law enforcement background and looking at going to the military just out of high school, not really knowing what I wanted to do. My mom got a flyer from Broward Fire Academy in South Florida. And she goes, "Hey, what about being a fireman?" And I went, "All right, I'll go check it out." And went and talked to a neighbor of mine. It was a firefighter. And he goes, "Go put your name on the list and we'll see how it goes." And, 30 years later, here I am. I've had a very interesting career. I've worked from South Florida. That was where I started my career, grew up in South Florida, and then moved up to Central Florida in 2002. Search and rescue was not something on my radar. The urban search and rescue, I went and took a rope rescue class early. It seemed interesting. With fire rescue, there's so many facets that you can get involved in, and you just kind of find one and make it your niche. Went, took a rope rescue class and kind of fell in love with it. And from there, it's just been more and more training, and, ended up, where I am now as the captain of special operations for Flagler County.
So that journey obviously has paid off, and the community's thankful that you did that. So what is it about being a part of such an important organization and role within a community that the community relies on, people rely on? What drives you to want to do that?
It's the challenge, really. It's the, even in the fire service in general, every day is different. You don't know what you're going to walk in day to day. You show up in the morning and it could be a nice, easy day, simple things, or you end up with some of the most challenging things you've ever seen in your life. And, that's what really kind of got me hooked in the fire service in general. It's just not that I'm not sitting in front of a computer all day. I'm not in an office all day. I'm not, and I've spent some time in fire administration, not my fun thing to sit in an office all day long, but it's just that challenge of every day is something different. Every day is every call, every time you go out is just another challenge.
Could imagine. And we're going to dive into mental toughness here and the 4 C's of mental toughness: commitment, control, challenge, and confidence. But I want to start with, what does mental toughness mean to you? And you apply it obviously every day, but what does it mean to you if you had to put it in a couple sentences?
I really hadn't thought about it till you asked me to do this. And, I've been thinking about it a lot lately. And I think it's just, for me, especially in my job, that mental toughness aspect really comes in from just preparing yourself. It's being prepared. It's, how you go about preparing yourself every day, how you go about, and I know that's one of the C's, we get into training and experience and all that. And it's just that, I think for me, that's probably the biggest thing. It's just being prepared and being ready to do whatever. um, you know, whatever time of the day it is. So I think for me, that's just a preparation thing for mental toughness for me.
And when I was preparing to have this conversation with you, that's one of the things I talked about is, lots of times as say an athlete or a sales professional, when the moment is, when the game is, when the presentation is, and you could prepare mentally for that and have these 4 C's on standby to help you. But in your situation, you could be sitting around having a cup of coffee and all of a sudden you're in a really crazy, dangerous situation. The shift to do that is what I'm very curious about. I think that's fascinating that you're able to do that. So why don't we dive into the 4 C's? We'll start with commitment. You kind of brought it up a little bit earlier. The search and rescue, and even as a firefighter, there's a lot of situations that will be exhausting. They'll be emotionally draining. What keeps you and the team focused on the mission at hand?
Again, with our job and the way we do things, a lot of it has to do with the fact that we're training constantly. We're preparing ourselves. I tell a lot of my guys, and especially new firefighters that come in, is you got to learn your basics. And when everything goes bad, that training and preparation on the basics is what you fall back to. I taught EMTs for a long time, EMTs and paramedics. And I used to tell them, I go, you're an EMT and you learn all the basic medical things. Then you go to paramedic school and you learn all this fancy stuff. But when all that fancy stuff goes wrong, it always falls back to what you learned at the very basic level. So if you're prepared at that basic level and you have your basic skills down, no matter what it is, search and rescue, even with our search and rescue team, we have a set go-to, you shouldn't have to think about it, setup. And then you pivot from there no matter what it is. And I think, that's the commitment to the training or just getting prepared at that basic level is really what makes the difference when everything starts to go haywire, which it usually does.
Yeah. Is there anything within the team or the organization? Well, 2 things. Number one, is there any kind of mental training that you guys work on, whether it's as you're first coming on board or long term? And then secondly, does any of that training or routines like tie into how you're going to stay committed and how you'll keep focused and emotionally under control, things like that?
Well, when I first got in the fire service, mental health wasn't a big push really at the time. And within the past few years, suicide rates of firefighters have gone up from the stress of what we see and everything else. And actually the Florida Fire Chiefs Association has just started an initiative for mental health and mental preparation for all these things that we see. They just started a new initiative. I just got an email on it the other day to help prepare. But mental health and mental toughness has taken on a new role really within the past, I'd say probably 10, 12 years, where we are seeing a lot more things to come in to help you mentally prepare for the types of things we see, the mental challenges that we face. So there's training that comes out every once in a while for that. Our chief now is very big on leadership and training leaders and future leaders. So we're starting to see a lot more of that training come up, to train, our current officers. They even been doing it for like me for, 20, 30 years, to the brand new officers that are coming in, to how to coach and lead and train the new generation that's coming up behind us. So there's a lot of training coming up in that area to help prepare, even myself now and in the future. So.
Yeah, I could imagine. And you're right. It's really only been over the last several years where it's become a little bit more prominent. Obviously, during 2020 and COVID, mental health became a much more out in the open topic, and people feel a lot more comfortable with it. But it's funny what you said earlier about, you didn't start thinking about mental toughness till I asked you to come on. And That's a response of a lot of people, whether they're on my podcast or they're a client or just, just a friend or family member I'm talking to. And they're like, I never really thought about mental toughness or what it really was or how important it was. And that's how I've been over many years. That's why I got involved and started educating myself and so forth, because you realize how critical it is, not just in situations that you go into where it's like very, very critical, but even in daily lives, relationships and things like that, it's really important. You brought up, and we've touched on a couple times on emotional control. I want to talk about control. There's really two aspects within the 4 C's of control. And one is life control, just knowing you are in charge of your life and you have things together the best you possibly can, and you have some goals, things like that. But the other side is emotional control. And in working with athletes and others, this is usually one of the big topics they want to focus on. They tend to, in high stake moments where the body physically gets that fight and flight situation going on, and maybe they have certain emotions, they don't know why they're feeling them, or they can't control them or manage them. How do you work on your emotional control in those very high stake moments, or where something really tragic has happened and your responsibility is to, take care of the individuals, the situation, and the community as a whole? How do you gather your emotions and get them under control?
I think in those high stress moments, it's just, I kind of live in the moment. This is my job. This is what I have to do. This is what's going on, and try to, and almost hyper focus on what's going on at the time, and really don't think about, the, I don't know a good way to put it, but the death and the tragedy of it, or the despair of it. I don't really get caught up into that too much in the moment. And then, the fire service is very, I think a lot of first responders and everything is very unique. Like we go back to the station, and that's where we talk it out. We'll sit around, have a cup of coffee, talk about it. Hey, how are you doing? What do you think? You get to work with your crew so long, you can tell when some things are affecting certain people than other people, and you can kind of pull them off to the side, talk to them a little bit about it. I don't know how I do it. I just kind of do it. It's not something I've ever really trained for. But I find myself, when I do get to those, it's just you hyper focus on what the problem is at hand. What is the task right now? And really just solve that problem. And the rest of it, I'll worry about later. And then, usually that firehouse table is where a lot of mental health counseling goes on just between us, and, over a cup of coffee or dinner or whatever, is where that really that emotional control or us talking it out and how we deal with a lot of that stuff.
I can relate. My wife is a cardiac ICU nurse, and she says similar things. And for them, sometimes after an emergency, code blue, those types of things, they regroup as a team in the hallway or, by the office location, and do exactly what you described. They have to kind of talk through it, what took place, things that were happening, and also how are each of, the team members literally feeling through that. The question I have is, some of your experiences are, they could be, say, a car accident or some really difficult situation, but it happens and it's compartmentalized into that day or a few hours. What is it like to manage those emotions and keep that focus you keep referring to when it's a search and rescue that goes on for several days or more?
It's, with our incident command system and the way we do it, you just, it's every day is a different task. When you go out, every day is a different mission. You're here one day and that's your mission and you complete it. And, usually you don't think about it too much, because you're usually so tired by the end of the day that it's, you gotta get ready.
Could imagine.
And then, the next day is another mission. The next day is another mission. The next day is another mission. And you just, you focus on that day, that mission, completing that mission. And then you just, you move on to the next day, you move on to the next day. So it's still kind of the same thing, or you just focus on the mission at hand and let's take care of the problem now. And then, like I said, I kind of worry about the rest of it later.
Yeah. What has there ever been a mission, maybe one example that stands out to you that did push you a little bit in that particular department?
Well, I don't know that there's ever been, I mean, I know there's, when I got involved with the large animal rescue program at University of Florida, I'm an adjunct instructor for them for the large animal technical rescue. And that's kind of where part of this whole award thing came from too, is how I got into that. And I used to work for Flagler County Fire Rescue. I was a battalion chief in charge of special operations there. And I'd been in that role for maybe 2 weeks. I'd been doing search and rescue for a while. And when I moved into that role, they're like, all right, you're the special ops guy. Here you go. And our chief had retired. And I'm like, okay, wait, I went from being like a team member and somebody to go to and do everything to now you're the guy. And I got a call from one of our battalions that, hey, we got a horse stuck in the mud. I'm like, what? You got a what? Why are you calling me? I do ropes and buildings and, I don't do this stuff. So we go out there and, one of our vets had taken a class somewhere. I know the person now that she took the class from, but, had taken a class and had a book. And, so my very first large animal rescue that I did ever in my career, after, 10, 12 years of doing search and rescue stuff, was taught on the fly on the back of a pickup truck from a book. And really just flipping through the pages and going, okay, well, we don't have this, but we have this. We don't have this, but we have this. And, and really just taking knowledge that we had in other areas and applying that to the horse that was stuck in the mud, and raising this horse out of the mud. And, and that's actually what led me down the path of, I did 3 or 4 horse rescues before I ever had any training in it. That just like, it seems like once you get one, it just kind of snowballs from there. And, just taking, that's probably the most challenging one I've run into where I didn't know what I was doing. I had no clue, but I had a book. I had somebody that had taken a class years ago and never used the stuff. She had some of the equipment. We had other stuff. And it was just that relying on, again, it's for the fire services in general. It's relying on the training that you've had. And, a lot of our stuff is coming up with it on the fly. I tell a lot of our guys, I go, from the new guy that's his very first day to me 30 years in, there's calls we show up and I go, I have no clue what's going on here. But you have to project that confidence that, you've been on the job 5 seconds, 5 minutes, 5 years, 15 years, 20 years. You still have to project that confidence that you know what's going on, because that's what calms the storm, is when people look at us to come help them. And so we have to be able to project that confidence when we go in there. It's like that whole duck on the water. You're nice and calm on time, but you're underneath, your legs are going crazy. But it's just being able to project that confidence, like, hey, I'm here to help. I'm going to do what I can. And sometimes it's just coming up with stuff on the fly, like that call. So it's been, I had a few like that. Most of them never go as planned. So it's a lot of stuff that's just outside the box thinking on the fly, and just reverting back to that basic training that you got in that very first class you took, however long ago.
You brought up confidence, and I'm going to get there in a second, but you also segued nicely into the third C, and that is challenge, which centers around risk orientation, how willing you are to take some risks, and then learning orientation. So whether something went right or wrong, you're going to use that information to grow next. And you just described the perfect scenario where you go in and you've never done that before. You have to take the risk, and you have to learn from each episode to get better and adapt and things. How is that a natural thing for most of the people on your team and yourself, or is that something you really got to get used to? Just because I'm sure not everything goes right. Like you said, there's probably all kinds of crazy stuff that happens, and you could either just be, taken back by that and lose focus, or you could learn from it, adapt, and move on. How does that come to be?
Again, never really thought about it. Don't really know. But you can see it in some people. You can definitely tell, some team members just got that little niche of just, all right. And I think most firefighters either learn it over time through training and experience. They learn how to deal with that, and then, a lot of it is again, it just all goes back to your training and relying on your training and being able to adapt on the fly.
Yeah, you're right. And I was going to ask, when most of, whether it's firefighters, EMTs, search and rescue, when people come on board, do you find that most people, that's kind of their personality or trait that they already have? Or is it something that most just have to learn, as they grow through their career?
I think there's some that just have it. You can tell usually pretty quick that some just have it, and they're in it, and they're, they have that little bit of outside of the box thinking. And, I think for the most part, most of us do. I don't think you last long in this career without having some of that bred into you somewhere along the way. But it is a learned thing. I don't think I necessarily had it right off the bat, but, as you spend time and you train and you go to classes, you start to learn more and learn more. You can adapt pretty quickly to what's going on. Yeah.
So you brought up confidence, and some will say, who study mental toughness, that confidence out of the 4 C's may be the most important. And there's some debate about that. But in terms of confidence, there's 2 areas. There's interpersonal confidence, how your ability to communicate with others in a constructive, positive way, and even, persuade people that might be thinking differently than you, things like that. And then there's confidence in abilities. And you did mention earlier about preparation, training, things like that. What is your training like on a daily, weekly, monthly basis? How do you get to the point where when something happens, everybody knows their role, their job, what to do, and how to handle situations, even if the situation's fairly new to them?
Well, in Flagler County, we have a 30-person technical rescue team that does most of the search and rescue stuff. We do practical training 6 times a year where we get together as a team and actually do training. And I really focus on, and what I really try to focus the team on is the basics. I try to throw some fun stuff in there that makes them think, and maybe some things that they won't see, or something that really makes them think here and there. But my main focus has always been to them to have the basics. I want them to have a go-to that no matter what, this is your starting point. So, and I think that helps build the confidence. They know that, all right, if I show up on this step by step, this is kind of how it's going to go. And then again, we mentioned it earlier, they can pivot from there. We have certain things that are set in stone. No matter what, this is what you do. No matter, it doesn't matter. But most of our policies and procedures are guidelines, more or less. It's allows them the flexibility to think on the fly and to start doing that, and to adapt to whatever situation it is. We have one of our training officers, and I forget which chief it comes from, but it's a saying that we really kind of adopted in Flagler County, is becoming a master of your craft, no matter what that is. It's becoming a master of crafts. We're expected to be the EMTs, the paramedics, the firefighters, as an officer, or doing search and rescue. We have a marine rescue team. We have a drone team. We have a lot of different things, but if you're not you have to take the time to perfect that. And it's hard because you're so multifaceted to keep up on everything. And again, it just goes to build that confidence. It really just goes back to training and and really building your foundation and building your basics that, that, hey, if this happens, I know what I'm doing, or I got an idea. And it usually starts with an idea. Hey, this is what's going to go on. And then you pivot from there, and all right, that didn't work. Let's go to plan B. There's a lot of trial and error that goes on some of these calls that you go, all right, well, that didn't work. Let's try something else. Yeah.
I could imagine. But what you just described is very familiar, because when I talk to athletes who are really good at what they do, perform really well, their coaches and people in other areas of life and professions, they always say, you have to master the basics. You can't move on. You can't do all these other things until you master them. You look at some of the great athletes out there, Michael Jordan and Tiger Woods and Michael Phelps, and they started by mastering the basics, and they kept that practice up. It wasn't like once they mastered, they stopped. They kept going and training themselves, so they never even had to think about that part of their job or task at any given moment. So I'm not surprised to hear that's exactly what one of your mantras are. So if I'm an individual, I'm not a fireman, EMT, search and rescue, military, anything like that, how do you think, what's the best way a person could apply the mental toughness ideas, concepts, framework in their daily lives? What would you give one or two tips to maybe a young person, or anybody else that kind of needs some assistance?
I think, really, even for me, daily life is just, you just have to realize that everything's not going to go your way all the time. And that willingness to adapt, and there's even, basics in your own life that you need to control or get control of. And, just, realizing that everything's not always going to go your way. I used to tell my kids, I said, winning is great. When I started coaching, but you also have to learn how to lose. And you learn a lot more from losing than you do from winning. So it's just that you have to be willing to adapt. You have to be willing to change on the fly. Not everything's going to go the way you want it to go. I'm very set in my ways so I get up at the same time every day. I do the same routine every day. When I go to work, I do the same thing every day.
Guilty.
I'm a creature of habit. I drive the same way to work every day. I have this whole, and that's almost like for me, it ends up being preparing myself mentally to go into work. And, and then if you mess up my routine, it kind of throws me off for a little bit till I can sit back and regroup and get back on the day. But I think that's probably the biggest thing, is just realizing not everything's going to go your way all the time. And you got to always have that, for us in the fire rescue world and everything, there's always a plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D, however far, and you got to have that same kind of thing in your own life, as far as just, have a plan. Not everything's going to go your way all the time. No.
It's funny you say that about the routine. My wife will tell you, like, I'm Ron Burgundy at times when they change the teleprompter on him. If you mess up my routine, I'm lost for the day. I have to do a complete reset. I may forget to do several things that day because I am out of routine. We're close to wrapping up here, but I want to go back to something you said earlier. You brought it up a couple times, and it's a topic that I find fascinating. It's part of mental toughness, and some say it's a byproduct of mental toughness. But you talked about focus and keeping that focus. And focus, a lot of people don't understand. It's not always a switch you could turn on. It's an actual 4-step process that maybe on another episode I'll dive into. But how do you get to that point where you have a hard focus? You're in the zone or the flow of what you're doing, and how do you keep that focus?
Everything I do when it comes to that search and rescue world, it just comes down to that preparation and knowing you've got the basic skills down. You're good. There is a switch, especially for us. There's this, when the tones go off, you get in, you see the notes, and you start thinking about, all right, could be this, could be, whether it's a medical call, search and rescue call, car accident, fire, whatever. There's just a checklist that starts going off in your head. I have some of my guys that, we'll go to an auto extrication. That's one of my favorite things to teach. And he'll sit there and go, how did you think of all that stuff? I don't know. It just happens. I said, I can give you the quick Cliff Notes version of what went on in my head, but there's no way I could tell you every single step that went through my head in the first 30 seconds of showing up on that scene. Same thing with the structural fire. And again, I think it just all goes back to being able to flip that switch. It just all goes back to training and preparation. And, and nailing down the basics and being confident in your basic skills and then advancing on that. I tell them my son, my oldest son works with me in Flagler County. He's a firefighter now, and he's doing really good and he's excelling. And, I told him from day one, you always take classes. If there's a class that comes up, go take it. If there's something you can go learn, go take it. My youngest son is, just finishing up combat medic training in the Army. So he joined the Army. So, and I keep telling him, he's like, oh, I can go do this. I can go do it all. The more you learn, the better you're prepared for whatever you're going to see. So I think that's the biggest part. It's just that it's especially in the fire service, it all comes down to training and preparation.
Yeah, that's great advice. Is there anything you would say to the community about your role, your team's role, organization's role in the community that maybe they don't understand that they should understand about everything that you do?
We try to do a lot of public outreach because I think there's a lot of people, especially in Flagler County lately, they go, oh, I didn't know we had that. I didn't know we did that. I didn't know we, a lot of people think that we just, medical calls and fires, and that's pretty much all we do. But again, the fire service is so multifaceted. The search and rescue role is we train for high risk, low frequency events. We may go a year and not have anything significant, or you may run 4 or 5 in a year. We go a year without hurricanes where we're putting some of our skills to the test, or like last year, we really didn't have anything. So I don't think they realize what all that we do. I think if I was going to suggest something to the community is go talk to your fire department, see what they have, see what kind of things they offer, not only, search and rescue wise or that, but there's so many other things that are out there for the community that fire departments all over offer that I just don't think people are aware of.
Yeah, that's right. They should reach out. You guys do a ton of different things. And I think everybody should take advantage of that. I know as a Flagler County resident, we appreciate you guys. Thank you for your service. I'm always amazed by first responders and those people who are willing to do all the things they do. Sometimes us normal folk, we take that for granted until we need that help. So we really appreciate that. And I'd love to have you back on because I have a couple other topics I think would be very interesting to dive into.
Anytime.
Yeah. Well,
Sure.
Captain Froling, thank you very much for being on the podcast. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, James. I've enjoyed it.
And for the rest of you out there, don't forget to like and share and subscribe and all that good stuff. You could always go to chargeforwardcoaching.com, learn a little bit more about mental toughness, learn a little bit more about me. You could always give me a call, text, or email and ask for a free discovery call. See if coaching is the right thing that would work for you and what you're trying to accomplish. And don't forget, you could always take the MTQ Plus mental toughness assessment. It's like the #1 assessment in the world for mental toughness, and understand a lot better about where you stand on mental toughness, that the 4 C's and 8 factors, and decide if you want to grow in any of those areas. But in the meantime, just keep charging forward.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of Charge Forward Coaching. Remember, the journey to greatness is built on mental toughness and consistent effort. So head on over to chargeforwardcoaching.com and book a free discovery call to take the next step in your journey. Until next time, stay focused, stay determined, and keep charging forward.